The moment he stepped onto the bright stage of Ireland's Got Talent, silence rippled through the audience like a held breath. They expected another talented singer, another story of dreams and struggle. What they did not expect was a voice so commanding, so hauntingly rich, so impossibly familiar that even Simon Cowell's famously stoic expression melted into awe. The judges leaned forward, the crowd stilled, and when the first note poured from his lips, the world seemed to forget itself. This was not just another audition. This was a revelation. If you have ever believed in the power of music to change a life in a single moment, then this is the story that will convince you. Before we dive into the incredible journey of the man who stunned the world, make sure you subscribe so you never miss a moment of talent that breaks every expectation. He arrived in Dublin on a cool spring morning, the sky brushed with streaks of amber and rose. Manila had been his home, its hustle and heartbeat stitched into his music. But Ireland was different. Its lilting breeze carried a promise that felt like destiny. His name was Rafael Santos, though most people would soon only remember him as the Filipino who sang better than Elvis. He had flown thousands of miles with one dream in his suitcase and an old guitar slung over his shoulder, the wood etched with the years of performances in dusty bars and crowded stairwells back home. The journey had already been long and unconventional, but his spirit was untamed in its belief that his voice carried something rare and timeless. He had watched Ireland's Got Talent episodes online, seeing performers from all walks of life chase miracles under those golden lights. On a whim one night, after another back-to-back gig in Manila where his voice had been applauded yet unnoticed by influential ears, he decided to submit his audition tape. He filmed himself singing an old rock and roll classic, blending his own emotional phrasing with a power that was unmistakably his own. He sent it with a trembling finger and went to sleep, not knowing that his life was about to pivot in ways he could never imagine. Days later, he received an email that made his heart hammer and his breath catch. He had been invited to audition in person. Suddenly the prospect of Ireland was real. In the airport, his guitar case felt heavier than it actually was, weighed down not by its contents but by the gravity of the opportunity. He thought about his family, about the sacrifices they had made to support his music, about the countless nights he had stood under dim lights singing for coins and hope. Yet as the plane lifted off, he felt a surge of clarity. Here was his chance to sing for something greater than applause, to sing for belief itself. Ireland's Got Talent was in full swing when Rafael stepped out onto the streets of Dublin. Posters lined the plazas, faces of contestants beaming with determination. The production crew was buzzing, vibrant with the rhythm of live television. Rafael checked into a small guest house, the owner greeting him with warm hospitality that soothed his anxious nerves. He practiced in his room, voice rising and falling with emotion, as though preparing for some unseen force that waited just beyond the door. The day of his audition arrived with an electric pulse. The waiting area was crowded with performers and hopefuls, each carrying a story, a passion, a dream. Some carried extravagant props, others whispered prayers. Rafael simply held his guitar, the familiar weight grounding him. When his name was called, he walked forward with steady steps, feeling both dread and exhilaration in equal measure. The lights were blinding. The audience was a blur of expectant faces. But then the music began, and the world stopped. He chose a song that was beloved across generations, a tune so iconic that anyone daring to interpret it risked comparison with legends. Yet he did not imitate. Instead, he embodied the song with reverence and fire. The first verse drifted gently like a whisper, drawing the audience in. The second verse climbed with emotion, his voice deepening, stretching with heartfelt sincerity. By the chorus, the connection was unmistakable. People leaned forward, hearts beat in rhythm with the rise and fall of his notes. Simon Cowell, sitting in his infamous seat of critique, loosened his arms from their crossed posture and leaned in as though struck by a sound he had never expected. Then a twist no one saw coming. Halfway through, Rafael paused. The music softened, and he spoke, his voice crisp with emotion. He told the audience about his journey, about growing up in the crowded streets of Manila, about singing because he had to and singing because he loved it, about the countless rejections that had taught him resilience. The crowd was silent, hanging on each word. He then launched back into the song, but this time his voice carried an emotional depth that transcended technique. It was as though he was not just singing notes but pouring memories, heartbreak, joy, and hope into the melody. When he reached the final note, it lingered in the air like a sacred promise. The audience erupted. Judges leapt to their feet. Simon Cowell, known for his measured reactions and sometimes cutting critiques, stood with his mouth slightly open, eyes glistening. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with genuine admiration. He praised Raphael's voice, his emotional delivery, his authenticity. He said something few had said about any performer, that this was one of the most remarkable auditions he had ever heard. The crowd cheered, and Raphael felt tears well in his eyes. He had come so far, and in this moment, it felt as though the universe was singing back to him. But the story was far from over, it was merely beginning its most dramatic chapters. After the audition aired, clips of his performance went viral. Comments flooded in from around the world, viewers shocked that a Filipino singer could reinterpret a classic with such soul that it felt new and electrifying. Some called him the next great voice of a generation. Others declared him better than legends. Record labels reached out. Offers emerged. Suddenly Raphael was navigating opportunities he had only dreamed of in quiet moments backstage at small venues. But with opportunity came pressure. The expectation to perform, to produce, to be something larger than he had ever imagined. A twist came that no one expected. Just as he prepared for the live semifinals, he received news from home that his mother had fallen seriously ill. Raphael's heart wrenched with fear. He wanted to stay by her side. His dream now tangled with guilt and concern. He spent days in turmoil, torn between the stage that had lifted him from obscurity and the family who had given him everything. He spoke to his mother on the phone, her voice weak yet proud. She told him to go, to sing not just for himself but for every soul that believed in him. Her words lifted him, yet a shadow of worry remained in his heart. When he returned to the contest stage for the semifinals, something had changed. His voice was still magnificent, but beneath the power lay a tender vulnerability that only heightened the impact. He dedicated his performance to his mother, and every note carried the weight of love and sacrifice. The audience was moved. Judges were moved. Simon made a comment that struck everyone watching. He said that Raphael's voice carried not only technical brilliance but the spirit of someone who had lived, loved, and endured. That night, Raphael advanced to the finals with overwhelming support from the viewers. As the finale drew near, the world watched with bated breath. The stakes were higher than ever. Media outlets interviewed him. Fans sent messages from distant continents. In every hotel room, in every quiet hour before a live show, Raphael thought of his mother and found strength in her courage. Yet doubt still crept in sometimes, whispering fears of failure or whether he could truly live up to the expectations swelling around him. On the night of the finals, the arena was electric. Thousands of fans cheered as cameras circled the stage. When Raphael walked out, people rose to their feet. It was a moment he had imagined countless times, yet the reality was more intense than any dream. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a heartbeat, and stepped into the light. He began with a slow, evocative ballad, his voice steady and rich. The audience listened, rapt. Then, in a bold twist, he transitioned into an original composition, a song he had written for his mother during her illness. It was raw, introspective, layered with emotion that only someone who had loved and feared loss could convey. The judges and audience were swept into a powerful wave of feeling. Cheers rolled, hands gripped seats, hearts beat quickly. When Raphael reached the final crescendo, the applause was thunderous. It was clear, this was more than talent. This was soul, unfiltered and sincere. When the results were announced, Raphael won by a landslide. The crowd's roar was deafening. Simon Cowell embraced him, congratulated him, and said that he had witnessed a moment in television history that would be remembered for years. Raphael's victory was not just a personal triumph, but a moment of inspiration for dreamers everywhere. The aftermath of his win brought new chapters, recording deals, world tours, collaborations with legendary musicians, and invitations to perform on stages he had once only seen on screens. Yet Raphael remained humble, grounded in his roots. Every success reminded him of his mother's voice encouraging him, of the streets of Manila where his journey began. He made a point to support aspiring artists, especially those from underrepresented communities like his own, offering opportunities to those whose dreams were still forming in quiet, hopeful hearts. Years later, When asked about that Ireland's Got Talent audition that changed everything, Raphael would smile. He would remember the hush in the audience, the disbelief in Simon's eyes, and the moment when a single note seemed to suspend time. He would say that it was not just his voice that carried him to success, but his willingness to risk vulnerability, to share his truth, and to sing not for fame, but for connection.